I have seen both ends, from one end to the other, to where I was an MP and I was an E4, and I had my squad leader or my E6 say, "Hey, do what I say, not as I do." Right? So they'll go do things that they probably shouldn't be doing, but they better not see me doing it. Right? And that was kind of okay culturally speaking within the army. Policy letters will say otherwise, but that was how we did it. And now on the other spectrum, I guess I'm that old guy because I am seeing a lot of changes in the military. I've seen a lot of changes, and it's very difficult when you go through 10, 15 years of the same thing and now you're seeing a culture change, and it's very different, and a lot of older people don't like change.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. If you are new, thank you so much for joining us. If you have been a regular listener, thank you so much for your support on and on every single week on the podcast. Today's guest is Eric. He was born and raised in Guam until he was 25 years old. In January 2000, he joined the Army Reserves as a military police officer at 17 years old. In 2005, he received a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice and commissioned into active duty as an Apache Aviator. He spent 6 years overseas and served in both Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. He's a senior Army Aviator with over 1,200 hours of flight time and over 300 hours of flight time in combat operations. He's had the opportunity to lead soldiers from the platoon level through 2 separate company commands. His most previous assignment was the Aviation Deputy Director of CJTF OIR. I hope I read that correctly, in 2020-2021. And he's currently on his last assignment in the Army as the current Operations Aviation Officer for the 3rd Armored Corps in Fort Hood, Texas, and plans to retire in December 2023 and settle down in the Panhandle of Florida with his wife and 2 kids. Eric, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about you. I know I said quite a bit in your bio, and you have quite the impressive bio. I'm so excited to have you on to share about your experience as a leader and what you've done. And just tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, as you said, I was born and raised in Guam. We're U.S. citizens at birth, and really, that's really what started my journey is being raised in an island in the Pacific Island. Really having a strong culture with family, with friends, is really what grounded me and took me throughout the Army. It didn't matter the position I was in. It didn't matter the environment I was in, where or what. I could always draw back to who I was as a person and the culture of how to treat others and how to respect others. So that's kind of the base of my existence. Really is going back to my culture, no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I'm leading, or no matter what mission I'm in.
I love that. And so what made you decide to join the Army specifically?
Well, not to go too deep into it, but obviously from World War II, being the war in the Pacific, it was a really big thing out there for us. Guam was part of World War II. If there's any history buffs listening in, and because of that, with the U.S. taking over Guam from the Japanese, almost every person from Guam, Chamorros, Guamanians, we're very, very patriotic people because of that. We're very thankful for the US. And everyone from grandparents to uncles to aunties to both of my parents were all in the military. So really growing up, it was kind of in the cards already. Like, hey, Eric, I know you haven't said anything about joining the military, but I know you're gonna join the military. So that's really what it was. I finished high school. I joined, like, I went to basic training like a couple days after I turned 18. And I've been in the military ever since. So just really in the cards for me.
I love that. And, I think I meet a lot of, I don't know why it is, Army specifically, where like culture and background and who you are plays such a huge role in what you decide to do in the military. I actually interviewed Sean Ambreitz a few episodes back, and he was Army, and his culture played a huge role too. And so it's interesting to hear that. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't, maybe it's because Army is, one of the older branches in the US. And I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thing that comes up for me as you're talking. But I want to get a little bit more into talking about your career in the Army and roles you've played as a leader. Obviously, you said you've led from the platoon level all the way up to company commands. You've served in combat operations. So just give a basic overlay of what leadership has looked like for you. I first want to address how you learned to be a leader, because I think that when we're talking about leadership in the military, at least Navy side, I can't speak for Army, leadership isn't really something that's taught. It's expected to be learned. So when you joined the Army, did you already have a basic level of leadership, or is this something that you had to learn through trial and error throughout your time served so far?
I think it was really closer to high school. In high school, I wrestled, I played football, and I did a lot of outrigger canoeing or paddling. And they were all teams, well, with the exception of wrestling, they were all team sports. And I was in positions in football and paddling where I was leading my team or in a leadership position. So that was really, I think, where it started from, was having a team around me, being in those positions of leadership, and not necessarily like the captain of the football team, but just being in a position to be able to lead people. And when I saw that, I kind of fell into it naturally. I liked it. I enjoyed it, and I liked to lead people into anything, whether it was races, it was games, and cheering victory and being champions. It all just felt amazing. And knowing that I had some piece in pulling them into championships or into races and winning, I love that. And I think it just naturally evolved when I went into the Army.
So what are some challenges that you've faced as a leader in the Army?
Oh wow! So I mean, a lot of challenges. Really depends.
Loaded question, I
Yeah, yeah, it
know.
really is, right? Like 20 years. Like, that's a deep question. But I think having a different culture, right? Not being born or raised in the United States, but in Guam, and then coming to the U.S. when I was 25. I think the biggest, not necessarily challenge, but culture, understanding other people's culture, understanding where everyone else is coming from. I think not necessarily my biggest challenge, but maybe my bigger strength in leadership throughout my time in the Army was empathy, right? It was really having the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, right? Because I think throughout my career, I did not really see a lot of empathy from leaders, whether that's at the platoon level with 30 people or out to company command of 250 people or more. They would say things, and maybe it would be in policy letters that they sign and post up on the walls, and hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you report this. This is what I support. But having that empathy and understanding of other people, I don't think they practice it enough. So that's kind of what I've seen throughout my time, as the biggest challenge in general. Really, is understanding other people's feelings and where they're coming from, so that you can be in a position to help them in whatever that needs to be done.
So probably another deep question, but I'm curious because I think this is going to be huge value to the listeners. How do you teach those around you to incorporate empathy into their leadership style?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily teaching. It's more of, I think it's more of just what I've mentioned, right? It's not just the policy letters, but it's by taking action. It's by doing. It's by showing, instead of educating them or giving them a class or some required class that we all had to take throughout our time in the military. It's really just it's leading from the front and just it's leading by action and showing them what I do or how I'm doing it, and hopefully that they take that upon themselves and do the exact same thing.
And so I know we're kind of in this weird era in the military right now where there's that really old school mentality, and there's more of what a lot of people call the new school military, and trying to figure out this dynamic between the two so that everything works well like a well-oiled machine. How do you handle that dynamic with people, and obviously having the diversity of people coming together? And, I'm sure you've experienced some clashes with it. You served for quite a bit of time. And so you've probably also seen both sides of the military. Do you have any advice or certain, insights that you can share about that?
Yeah, Rachel, you're bringing in some really deep questions here, and I appreciate that, right? Because it's for the listeners. But yes, I have seen both ends, from one end to the other, to where I was an MP and I was an E4, and I had my squad leader or my E6 say, "Hey, do what I say, not as I do." Right? So they'll go do things that they probably shouldn't be doing, but they better not see me doing it, right? And that was kind of okay culturally speaking within the army. Policy letters will say otherwise, but that was how we did it. And now on the other spectrum, I guess I'm that old guy because I am seeing a lot of changes in the military. I've seen a lot of changes, and it's very difficult when you go through 10, 15 years of the same thing, and now you're seeing a culture change, and it's very different. And a lot of older people don't like change, right? It's not like the new generation. The new generation, they're all about change and whatnot. But I think what helped me throughout the years transitioning, especially like in command positions, was you couldn't just tell soldiers, hey, do X, Y, and Z, right? Here's the mission statement, here's your intent, here's your key task and end state, go execute it. Back in the day, that's all you needed, and they would go and do it. But now you really have to inform soldiers. You really have to give them the why behind what I'm asking or telling them to do. I think once I understood that I have to give you the why of everything, then for me, that kind of clicked. Because once I'm like, hey, I need you to do this. I understand you don't know why. I understand you don't see the second, third order effects of what you're actually doing. But let me sit you down and explain to you how important this one task that you think is minuscule is actually very huge, and the impact that you're going to have at an organization. So understanding and explaining the why behind everything was for me that turning point for between the old and the new generation.
What do you prefer, the old generation or the new generation?
Um, I think both sides have its place, right? When we're in combat, like I'm gonna tell you one time and you're gonna do it. Because if you don't, someone might die, right? So there's a time and place. If we're back in the United States and we're in the office and I give you a task to do and you're it's a Friday, you want to go home and party, I'm probably gonna have to give you the why. I'm probably gonna have to explain to you and stay there with you and do it with you. So really it's based off of the situation at hand.
I love that answer. And you're right. I mean, there's a situational time and place for everything. And they think the people that I've respected the most in the military are the people who know when to turn off and turn on certain levels of leadership, because it evolves and it's ever changing. So I want to talk about the mental health aspect of leadership, because obviously you've probably seen a number of things in your time as a leader, people going through certain challenges, and especially in a combat environment and even at the at-home environment. What have you seen from people beneath you, and how have you as a leader handled these situations?
So for me, I think as a platoon leader, so when I first went into active duty, late 20s, early 30s, it was, I guess, a little more hush hush on like the behavioral health aspect, right? Especially being in an aviation community, the type A personalities and having the best of the best and being perfect in everything. like that wasn't necessarily the environment where you wanted to be weak or vulnerable and put it out there to everybody else. So there was definitely the stigma back in the day where if you needed help, you better not have asked me for it, right? But kind of culturally speaking, if you needed help, you needed to go in and go get help, but take care of your business. And when you come back to work, you better be ready to work. So as I saw that culture throughout the military, I got to my first command. Fast forward a few years, Savannah, Georgia. This was probably 2011, 2012. Um, I knew that that was still somewhat the culture, but at that time, we were starting to transition on behavioral health being this negative stigma to, hey, we want to help you. We understand that not everybody is perfect and everyone has problems that they need to fix or face. We want to help you because it's just an important factor in the readiness of your formation, right? And obviously that had to go down from the private all the way down up to the generals to understand that culture. So as a company commander, I would see if I was able to see someone who needed help and they were too afraid or too they just didn't want anyone to really know. What I would do as a company commander is I would always talk to everybody, even if it's on a one-on-one basis. And I would try and get to know them better. And I would build trust with them, which I think was very important. Building trust so I know who I could talk to, right? As a commander, soldiers don't really open up to you. It's just the way of life, no matter how light you are. So I really leveraged my platoon sergeants, my platoon leaders, my squad leaders, my warrant officers who were amazing pilots who talked to their soldiers and really sat down and maybe had beers with them over the weekend, which I didn't. So I would talk to them as well, and I would figure out who needed help, right? And maybe it was Specialist Rachel who was going through something that and she didn't know how to ask or she didn't know what help was out there. I would go talk to, for example, the chaplain, the battalion chaplain, who I had a very good rapport with. And I would talk to him and I'd be like, hey man, so I understand that this is going on with Specialist Rachel. Why don't you go talk to her? You know, she's over there fixing the helicopter. Why don't you just bump into her and talk to her about her day and ask a general question about this topic? And that was one of the things that I use. Those are one of the tools that I use to leverage the subject matter experts to help out my formation. Because me as a company commander, I wasn't the subject matter expert in anything, but what I did have were the professionals around me that could help them. So that's kind of how I got through that.
You made so many good points there. One thing that I really want to reiterate that you mentioned is that you proactively not only took the time to get to know everyone around you, but took a genuine interest in their lives, what's going on, and taking it a step further to build rapport with these resources to take an approach that I think a lot of people don't take. I think a lot of leaders in the military, when it comes to mental health, which, mental health could be anything, right? It doesn't mean that someone's in a suicide crisis. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're just going through something. And I love how you leveraged the chaplain, for example, to not necessarily make it a huge deal and send them to the chaplain and say you need to do this, but you made it very natural, very conversational, and left it up to that individual how much they want to share about their situation. So that is a huge gold nugget that I hope that the listeners take into account and use in their leadership. I know I have a number of listeners that listen to this podcast so that they can take what they learn and use it to be a better leader. So I really, really appreciate that you shared that point. Did you ever lead in a command where there was a suicide?
I fortunately did not. I don't want to say I've been lucky, but I never had to go through that as a company commander or platoon leader or anything of that nature.
That's good. Yeah, I was going to ask about that experience and how it was handled if you had, but I'm glad you didn't. That's good. And I think you
Um,
are fortunate to not have been in that situation because we don't obviously want people taking their lives in the military. And I think it goes to say a lot about leadership when there are less suicides. Obviously, not every suicide is because of bad leadership, but I think that they can really exacerbate those mental health specific situations. So that's phenomenal
Yeah,
that you
no,
never had to experience that.
I never had to experience a full up, but on my first command, I did have to experience a soldier in my company going through that and almost being successful, I guess. So not having a suicide in my company, but almost. So again, very very lucky that I haven't had to experience that.
So how was that situation handled with the attempt, and how did it affect everyone? And do you think that it was effectively handled moving forward?
Well, yes, I believe it was effectively handled moving forward, because after the event, after he got care, he came back to work, and a few months into work, he went right back into the mix, and he did well. Years later, he's still with us and everything else. But with that, it was really just getting behind the team and the people that he trusted within the company and taking them with me and trying to support him in any way. And again, just like I said earlier, like leveraging the people I knew, whether it was behavioral health or chaplains or whatever the case was, whether that was me getting deeply involved with helping him in any way he needed. I mean, if that was like daily phone calls, sit downs with me on a one-on-one every day, that's just what it took.
No, that's great. And I love again that you use that leveraging of people and making sure that someone is comfortable. I think that's a really important point to make, is that when someone's in crisis mode, or their own form of crisis, because to us sometimes it might seem like not a big deal, but to them it might be a huge deal. But you leveraging people that they're comfortable with, I think that is a huge point that leaders can take away, because you don't want to make someone more uncomfortable when they're already going through stuff. So love
Right.
that you do that. So you've been at Fort Hood for a while. Obviously, Fort Hood is a place that has been in the spotlight in the last couple of years because of everything with Vanessa Guillen and what happened there. What have you seen on that base in particular, as far as changes in how leaders are handling situations ever since everything came up with that? And have you seen a shift from, I don't know if you were there at that base when that whole
I
situation was happening, but
I was not here. Um, I I was assigned to Fort Hood, but I was downrange at the time, and I came back after everything after the dust settled.
so have you seen any major shifts or changes that have taken place as far as how leaders are being trained or handling situations, or has there been anything major taking place at that base that you have noticed that you're able to share with us at least?
So really, where I sit at Fort Hood, I don't really see the ground anymore. It's more policies, regulations, orders, and whatnot. So from I guess from the leadership perspective, I can't really speak on that. However, I do know within the last year that Fort Hood stood up a people first center is what they call it, and that gets briefed on what they're doing, how they're bringing it to fruition, and how they're implementing all the policies in this center. I know it's getting briefed all the way up to the most senior person on Fort Hood on a weekly basis because I'm part of that briefing. And it's really, again, it's going back to the people. It's going back to the soldiers, right? It's not about the leaders, it's not about this or that, it's about the soldiers. And it's a center that they provide coaching, they provide teaching, they provide classes to soldiers, they provide leadership classes on how to, I guess, better techniques on how to manage and lead soldiers in a better environment. So just all in all, trying to create a better space for soldiers at Fort Hood, which I think is amazing, right? Because 5 years ago, no one would have put any time, effort, or money into that. And now, like, it's getting all the attention, it's getting a lot of resources sent to it, and they're constantly changing, they're constantly reviewing, they're constantly doing after action reviews and tweaking and really putting a lot of effort into making this center amazing for the soldiers.
Okay, so the People First Center, obviously, one of the times we talked previously prior to recording, you told me about this center, and it sounded like such an amazing thing that's going on there. And I love that the Army is taking steps, especially at Fort Hood, to do things to make things better for the people there. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what the People First Center is?
Yeah, absolutely. The People First Center that I was talking about at Fort Hood, they conduct immersive, like, collective training at the company level. So company commanders, platoon sergeants, squad leaders, really where the rubber meets the road with each soldier, and they certify those leaders in special skills in order to reduce like the harmful behaviors that we've been seeing in the past few years, while building the trust of their soldiers, building the cohesion and lethality amongst the team. So it's really these team building events and certifying these soldiers to go out and do better things.
I love that. And I love that there's a people first initiative here that is really, really being brought to the forefront. And, looking at the website on the army.mil page, what I love the most is that the vision really encompasses the whole population investment in the people. And so it sounds like the military, at least on the Army side, is really starting to understand that the people are the biggest investment. And if you don't take care of the people, then the mission doesn't get done properly. And so I'm going to post the link in the show notes for the People First Center for anyone who wants to go check it out. There's obviously a lot of information here. If you're at Fort Hood and you want to check that out, please do. And then let me know, because I'm really, really curious about the different steps that the military is taking to help with better leaders, better mental health. And yeah, I think that's just an awesome thing from the sounds of it. And Eric, I believe you said that there's been some really good feedback on the center as well.
Yeah, so again, me being at the nosebleeds, right? Not being on the ground. At that level, we have been hearing a lot of really good feedback from the soldiers who go through this training and go through these leadership skills. So I really would love to hear actual feedback that hopefully they reach out to you or leave comments and actually give us the ground truth, because what we're hearing is that yes, this training, just like every other Army training, it's mandatory training, right? Voluntold. But the soldiers who go through this and come out of it, they actually give really good feedback, and they absolutely recommend it to the other junior leaders who haven't gone through yet.
And remind me what rank you are again.
I'm an 04.
Okay, so obviously the
Yeah.
feedback that you get is probably going to be different than the feedback I get. So I'm curious.
Exactly.
I'm gonna
Exactly.
reach out. I'm gonna
Right.
reach out to my network and ask about this People First Center, because
Yeah.
I am connected with a number of people down in Fort Hood area, and
Good.
I'm legitimately curious. So if you're listening into this episode, please send me an email at podcast@ysdeh.com. Let me know your legitimate thoughts, and I'm gonna pass them on to Eric. I will not say your name. It will be anonymous, but I'm curious because, yeah, I mean, I think that we have the right idea here when we're talking about what can we do from an organizational standpoint to make things better. But obviously, everything, it doesn't matter what the program is, it doesn't matter what the resource is, everything could always be better and could use some fine tuning. So, feedback is always such a great way to make these things better. And so, Eric, if there is a way for you to get direct feedback, is there a way that people can contact you, or is it better if they go through me?
We'll let them go through you.
Sounds good. Like you're still active, so I didn't know if you wanted to,
Yeah.
put anything out there. But yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. And yeah, I mean, I would love to just kind of wrap this up by talking about tips that you have for new leaders joining the military to where they can really build themselves up, but then also any words of advice that you have for the more seasoned leaders in the military so they can be better.
Yeah, so for the new leaders in the military, just understand that yes, you've gone through a lot to get to where you're at. Yes, you're in leadership positions, but no, you don't know everything. And no, you don't have the answers to every problem that you're going to come across. So understand that you have a team to your left and right that you can leverage in order to make the team better, whether that's your chief or your platoon sergeant or your squad leader or whoever it is. Maybe it's the chaplain, maybe it's your lawyer because you are in a leadership position. Understand who's to your left and right and know when you can pull that lever in order to help somebody. I think that's the biggest thing. That was my biggest challenge growing up was not understanding what levers I can pull to really help somebody out because me being a type A person, I can do everything. I got all the answers and I can fix it, right? It took me a long time to figure out that there are a lot of people out there who are better than I am that can fix it better than I can. So that's my advice to the young leaders coming up. And for the old crusty people like me, just understand that soldiers coming into the military are not like us in the mindset, in the culture. They are being raised in different cultures. Whether you like it or not, it's happening. It's here. Embrace it, understand it, empathize with it. Because if you don't, you're going to get left behind and you're going to be an irrelevant leader really soon.
Thank you. Words of wisdom. I want to really side note briefly talk about as you are getting ready to transition out of the military, what you are doing to prepare yourself. I think that that's going to be of value to the people who are transitioning out. Obviously, you're not out yet, so you're going through it right now. What are you experiencing right now as you've spent so many years of your life in the military and you're getting ready to transition out? Are there any tips that you have for people who are in your shoes right now?
Yeah, so for the military personnel who are transitioning out, whether that's 4 years in the military or 20 years in the military, just understand that getting out is it's a process. It's not an event, right? You're not going to go turn in your paper in or your paperwork in a week or a month. Like it takes months, if not a couple years, depending on how long you've been in. So what I'm trying to get at is that you have to prepare yourself mentally and transition and be as prepared as you can. So for me, I'm retiring next year. So I've got to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, right? And lately I've been investing, I guess I've been diversifying my portfolio in order to set myself up for financial freedom down the road, right? Because when you get out, whether it's 4 years or 20 years, you're really not offered financial freedom. You're still going to be living paycheck to paycheck, and that's what none of us want to do, right? Nobody wants to live paycheck to paycheck. So really figure out what works for you, really invest in your future. And the ways you can do that is through self-education, it's through networking. Reach out to people, start talking to people, start educating yourself, start taking courses. Don't just see something in the internet and go buy $10,000 worth of crypto, right? Do educate yourself, network with other like-minded individuals and make the best decision you can. And whenever you're doing that, always look at what's ahead. So look at 2 years down the road, look at 5 years, look at 10 years. Don't just look at when's your next paycheck because you have to take care of you.
And what's next for you once you get out, other than moving to the Panhandle?
So I've transitioned into commercial real estate. So I'll be a commercial real estate investor purchasing apartment complexes. So really building generational wealth is what I'm doing.
I love it. Yep, I'm in this space as well, so it's obviously
Yeah,
how you and I connected, and
right.
I really encourage the active duty personnel because I mean you're in such a great position, active duty, to be able to start learning something like this or any kind of investing. I think that it's such a great space to be in, and you made so many good points with the networking and figuring out what works for you. You know, a lot of people go to school. I think the military really pushes hard on that GI Bill, but I think there's so many options out there to really be able to create that life. So I love that you're pushing for that financial freedom so you can spend that time with your family and really enjoy the retired life after working hard for 20 years in the military. So Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. Is there any parting words that you want to leave the guests with?
Just know that there's always someone that you can talk to. Just know that there's always someone out there who does care about you, whether you think so or not. Your voice will be heard. You just need to tell somebody. If you know something's going on in your head that you need to address, don't be afraid to speak out, to go seek help, because help is always there. There's a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of time put into helping uh helping soldiers, helping sailors, helping airmen, helping us. There's a lot of time and effort put into it, a lot of money put into it. It's there for you. Use it. Don't be afraid. This is your future. This is your life. Only you can take the action to better yourself.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.